Welcome to I Know How You Feel, a podcast for common experiences not so commonly shared. This is a platform for growth, connection, and mindful conversation. Today on the podcast, we have Lindsay. Lindsay is a proud mother of two, one angel and one earthside baby. She is a wife, audiologist, bookworm, and expert on how loss can change you in unimaginable ways. Let's connect with Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I am too. I feel like these are topics we really need to chat about. I don't think they get a lot of airtime. And as you know, we pretty much just dive right into it. So I want to get started so we have all the time we need for your story. I know you have a beautiful little boy who just turned 1, and I want to chat about your pregnancy and postpartum experience with him. But first, I want to go back to the beginning and chat about your pregnancy with your daughter.
Yeah. I got pregnant with my daughter in April of 2021, and it was my first pregnancy. And so we were obviously very elated and so excited. When everything was going really well, nice and smooth. OB appointments, there was no, odd symptoms. It was very, very run of the mill almost. And then we had our 20-week anatomy scan, and that's kind of when things turned upside down for us. We left there with a diagnosis that our daughter had a very severe congenital heart defect called hypoplastic left heart syndrome, or HLHS for short. Essentially, it's where the left side of the heart never developed. So she essentially had half of a heart. And as you can imagine, we left the anatomy scan with just an absolute pit in our stomach and just overwhelming despair, to say the least.
When you left there, what was your initial response after getting through that space? Was it to do research? Did you make more appointments? How did you find out more about her condition and continue to try to enjoy your pregnancy and still figure out how to take the best care of her?
Yeah, so it was I mean, as you can probably imagine, it was just an absolute whirlwind. I mean, the first place that we went, that any person nowadays goes to, is Google. And of course, we're looking at expectancies, we're looking at treatments and, quality of life and just all these different articles. And it's just, one gut punch after another. I specifically remember one of the first things that comes up, when you Google it, is that the life expectancy to the age of 5 is 73% or 75% or something like that. And so as a parent, you're just doubled over in sadness. I mean, that was kind of the first initial thing that we did. After that, we searched for support groups, and we found a couple of moms actually, that had kids with HLHS, and they were 12, 13 years old. They had gone through all the, and I'll get into the surgeries and things like that, but they had gone through all of that. And so it gave us a lot of hope. But after we got that diagnosis, we were sent over to a bigger hospital system near us, arguably probably one of the most, I would say, notable hospital systems in the country. And that's where we got all of our care, from then until I gave birth, and then even after birth for all of her surgeries. So, we went through echocardiograms one after another to just monitor her heart and growth scans to monitor her growth. But essentially, the plan was that she was going to get 3 surgeries, open heart surgeries, over the course of her life. The first being when she's a couple days old, the second being around 6 months of age, and then the third and hopefully final surgery would have been just after her second birthday. And so we were ready. We had a plan in place. We knew what to expect. It was, then it was just kind of a waiting game, waiting for her to get here and just make sure that I was taking care of myself as much as possible, not only physically, but mentally. As you can imagine, it was, a huge toll on both my husband
Definitely.
and I. Yeah. And just trying to keep a positive mindset, not going on Google and reading all this, pessimistic, oppressive stuff, and just trying to keep an open mind and trying to stay positive and trying to, I did a lot of visualization. I tried to do a lot of like manifestation and visualization of having my daughter home for Christmas, having, Thanksgiving, like what we would dress her up as for Halloween. So doing a lot of stuff like that, really helped us stay positive and, for as long as we possibly could in that sort of situation.
Definitely. And it sounds like you were in one of the better healthcare systems in the country and having access to all that medical care. It sounds like you definitely had confidence in her birth plan and subsequent care plan. So, talk to us about how everything unfolded.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had, in my opinion, the best team that we could have hoped for. And I felt incredibly confident and incredibly comfortable going into her birth and going into this situation. I felt like we had just this amazing team of doctors that just had answers to all of our questions, and they were incredibly knowledgeable. And this is a hospital that not nearly, but they have a lot of HLHS patients that they see. They do a lot of these surgeries, yearly. It's not just this very abnormal thing for them. It's a very common sort of diagnosis that they see because they are such a big, well-known hospital. So yeah, going into birth and going into all of that, we felt incredibly comfortable and confident. Those first days with her were incredible. She was obviously, she was in what they call the PCTU, which is the Pediatric Cardiothoracic Intensive Care Unit. So it's a mouthful, but essentially it's just an ICU for heart babies, essentially. And so she was there obviously before surgery and after surgery. So we were in her room with her, all the time. And she had her first open heart surgery at 4 days old. And we, had a little, they would call us intermittently throughout the surgery just to kind of give us updates and everything else. And it was supposed to be about like an 8 to 9 hour surgery. It ended up being a nearly 10 to 11 hour surgery. And afterward, the surgeon came and spoke to us, and she stated that during the surgery, she obviously accidentally caused more damage to our daughter's heart. Specifically, she damaged one of her working valves. Mind you, she only has half of a heart, so she only has half of the valves that a normal heart does. So she only has 2 working heart valves, and she damaged one of those valves. And looking back and reflecting, I don't think my husband nor I understood the gravity of what she had just told us. I think we were in such shock, and we were just so worried about her and seeing her that we didn't even really register what that meant. And she continued to tell us that she's going to be placed on essentially life support. It's called ECMO. So, again, that's how I'll be referring to it, but it's essentially life support. It's a machine that does the breathing and the work of the heart for her. And she told us that, essentially we're doing this just to allow her to relax and to recover for the next couple of days. And then we'll try to trial her off of ECMO, essentially making sure that her body can keep her alive without the machine. And so, again, we were just trusting them. They were the experts. Why wouldn't we trust what they had to say? So, a couple days go on. She's stable. She's doing fine. As fine as you can be, just having open heart surgery. And so we try to trial off ECMO. And we do this 3 times. We try this 3 different times, 3 separate days. And eventually she went back in for a second open heart surgery to try to help repair that valve. After that surgery, the surgeon basically told us that they did all that they could do surgically. And there's really not a whole else lot that, much more that they could do surgically. And she went into cardiac arrest after surgery in the recovery room. And they had to place her back on ECMO. And because of that cardiac arrest event, her kidneys had shut down. And so then she was on dialysis. And essentially we went through all of this because we were trying to get her put on the heart transplant list at this point, because the damage to her heart was so significant that the other 2 surgeries that we had planned for were not going to hold up. It would not suffice with the way that her heart was at that point in time. So getting her on the transplant list was really our last option. However, in order to get on a transplant list, you have to, or the patient has to have and meet certain criteria, right? And obviously a lot of that criteria has to do with how well their other organs are functioning. Essentially, they have to prove that if they get this organ, that they'll be able to live and make good use of it. I know that sounds so morbid and so kind of grotesque, but that's essentially what it is. So they have to have good working kidneys, good working lungs. They have to have, just there's a number of criteria that they have to meet. And because of our daughter's kidneys, they just weren't coming back. And mind you, this was about 3 weeks after her first heart surgery. So we were in the hospital with her on life support for 3 weeks, just hoping and praying for something, for anything, It eventually got to a point where her body was telling us that it was time to let go. Her body was essentially shutting down. There was nothing else that could be done. So we were moved into this room called the transition room. And it had like a big king size bed and like a lounge area, and they took her vent out so that we could see her face and like all the tubes from her face. And obviously kept her on ECMO, but we were able to hold her and be with her for as long as we wanted. And this was still kind of, it definitely wasn't in the height of COVID, but COVID was definitely still a concern. So we really couldn't have a lot of people up there. So we had my parents, and then my husband's parents came in as well to hold her and be with her. I have no idea how long we were with her, but eventually, and this is just something that no parent should have to do, but eventually we basically told them that it was time and that we were ready. And I was holding her, and they slowly, turned the ECMO machine off. And I will never forget the absolute penetrating silence that happened after they shut that machine off. It was just absolutely silent. And I held her until she took her last breath. And unfortunately, our story didn't end the way that we had hoped it would.
Thank you so much for telling us about your daughter. I know, like you said, no parent should have to go through that, and especially when you were so confident in the birth plan. I want to circle back to a couple of things because I know in those moments, being with your daughter while she took her last breath, you and your husband were just, I'm sure, in absolute shock and disbelief that this had happened. I just want to ask, the surgeon who damaged the valve, did they ever come after that and chat with you? Did they ever come and listen to your grief? Did they ever apologize for what happened? Or was it more like, okay, well, this is what happened, like very clinical, and then they just moved on?
It felt, to me at least, obviously being the mother, it felt extremely clinical to me. And again, this is just all like, in hindsight. I mean, my husband and I were just so distraught and just so, disassociated sometimes with when we were like conversing with the doctors and with other people, because it was just almost a feeling of like, I cannot believe that my daughter is going through this, or that I can't believe I'm here. So I'll never forget, she came to our bedside, to Everly's bedside, and after the second heart surgery, and that's when she kind of said like, this is pretty much all that we could do surgically, like we tried the best that we could. I honestly don't remember if she said I'm sorry. I don't remember if she said I'm sorry. And I remember just being so numb and so like disassociated that I barely even registered her, and I barely even gave her a response. And I wish that I would have. Like, I just wish that I would have said something to her, to know how much she hurt us and my daughter. At the time, it just felt very, very clinical. And like I said before, even after her first open heart surgery, when she had told us what had happened and told us that she was going on ECMO, even then, I don't feel like my husband and I really grasped what was going on. And I wish that I would have pressed further and asked more questions and been more like, forthcoming. But I was just so shell shocked. I was so in total disbelief. I just couldn't, I didn't have, like, I couldn't form coherent thoughts in my head to
I can
confirm.
imagine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
I can't imagine to have like even looking back now, like you said in hindsight, I wish I would have said something or,
mhm.
I wish I would have remembered, but I mean, you were going through the ringer
Yeah.
and I don't know if I would have been able to to form a coherent thought,
Yeah.
honestly.
I mean, it was just honestly survival. It was just surviving to the next day to hopefully get better news. It was surviving overnight to go see her in the morning and ask how her night was and and make sure that she was stable and make sure, you know what I mean? It was, and I remember having like her vital signs, up on the screen. And my husband and I were obsessed with those numbers, like obsessed with the different numbers. And we knew what they meant, right? Because we asked and you learn all this different, you learn so much while you're there as well. And so we became just obsessed with these numbers and obsessed with all of these different things. It was, God, I feel awful saying this, but there was some part of it that it was exhausting, to constantly obsess over these things, but then never see anything change and never get the news that you wanted to hear. And so your mental capacity is just not there at that point, you know?
Well, also being exhausted, it's like you just gave birth,
Right.
a few weeks ago, and then immediately after giving birth, you're in survival mode, and that kicks your body into a different gear.
Yeah.
After you and your husband left the hospital and you go home and you don't have your daughter with you, walk us through like how long it took your body to come down and what the postpartum experience was like with no baby. While we're on the topic of grief and postpartum, I just want to take a moment to share a resource I think could really support parents, not just navigating the hard stuff, but also in finding connection through the everyday. It's called Good Talk Baby. Good Talk Baby helps new parents stay connected, have meaningful conversations, and strengthen their relationship during the early parenthood phase. Their initial product, the New Parent Relationship Kit, is now available on Amazon and it's the best gift for new parents. It's a comprehensive 4-part card game that includes check in prompts, deep dive questions, and bonding activities, along with task management. This game is designed to give parents a much needed pause to reconnect, share their experiences, and grow closer. It's a gentle reminder that the relationship is still a priority. There's no complicated rules or setup, just open the box and start connecting in minutes. If you want to check it out, we have it linked in our podcast description.
Oh man, that is a loaded question. You know, as far as the time it took for my body to come down and for, I would say not even for my body to come down, but just for my nervous system to re-regulate. I mean, I feel like even sometimes it's still not quite there, even now. And she passed away in February of 2022. So it's coming up on 3 years. And I still, there's still a lot of trauma that I carry from those 20 days. But there's also a lot of joy. And so having that mixed bag of emotions, of such extreme emotions, is so exhausting to constantly regulate. And so I feel as though sometimes I'm still not quite there, which is okay. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There are many, many days, few and far in between now, but coming home, it was a constant thing. It was an hour by hour, you know, survival. And then it became a day by day survival. And then it became, and slowly but surely it kind of extends out. So it's hard to say, but I feel like even sometimes now I still don't quite have that regulation back. As far as, postpartum experience without a baby, it's, it's awful. There's no other word to describe it. I remember feeling extremely mad at my body, because my milk came in and I had been trying to pump for my daughter. And then, she passed away and my milk was still there. I remember being so mad at my body and being so mad at the universe in general that I am postpartum. I'm recovering, I'm healing with no baby. How cruel, how cruel. And I had a really hard time. I am so sorry. You can probably hear my son. But I had a really hard time accepting my body again and accepting myself. I had a hard time. I didn't feel like me for a really, really long time. And I think that that was not only postpartum, but I think that that was grief. And so dealing with postpartum and grief at the same time was, whew, it was a doozy. It was an absolute doozy.
I mean, grief on top of hormones is,
Oh,
it
yeah.
just sounds like a recipe to not feel like yourself. What did your grief journey look like, and how did you find your way back to yourself? How did you find a way to love your body again and find a way to just find peace in the
Yeah.
midst of all? How did you grieve that and find your way back home?
Whew, a lot of work. I, before my, and here's, I would say this is probably the biggest thing that probably this, not, I wouldn't say single handedly, but one of the biggest things that helped me process and grieve and kind of get back to home, as you were saying. And before my daughter was even born, I had expressed to my OB that I was extremely nervous about postpartum anxiety and depression, especially given that I was going to have a medically complex child and everything else. And so we had set up a 3-week mood visit. It was just a virtual visit, but we had set up an appointment for us to check in with one another. And at that mood appointment, my daughter had died the day before that appointment was set. I still went to the appointment and I basically was like, I need help. I obviously knew I was going to need help. Grieving a child and outliving your child is not natural. And I knew right then and there that I needed help. And I just said it. I just said, I need help. And they hooked me up with this program through the hospital that essentially provides therapy for free for X amount of visits. And I had a therapist that I saw. I think I started out seeing her 2 times, maybe 3 times a week. I think it was maybe two. And then again, it slowly kind of got down to like once a week or so on and so forth. But she was an incredible resource for me. She was incredible. And I feel so grateful and so lucky to have found that and to be able to say that, because I know that that is not the case for everyone. But I would say that that was probably one of the biggest helpers for me. Obviously, in addition to my husband, who was my absolute rock, to my mother and my father and my family and my in laws. I mean, just outpouring of love and support from friends and from coworkers. I mean, our community and our village very much rallied around us and lifted us up. And because of that amazing support system and because of my therapist that I found very, very, relatively early on, I really feel like those two things very much helped me kind of crawl out from the absolute pit that I was in. It wasn't obviously easy and it didn't happen overnight by any means, but my
No,
gosh.
I love therapy. I love telling people
Yeah.
about therapy. I
Oh
always
my
love telling people about my experience with therapy, but I am really glad that you did acknowledge that it was a process to drag yourself out of the pit because
yeah.
I just think when these experiences happen and parents lose, their babies or their children,
Hmm.
and they hear stories like this and they're like, "Oh, okay, well, they had a support system and they went to therapy and then it was all fine." And I'm just curious because I know, everybody's story is different. Were there ever days where you're just like, I cannot. I
Oh my
absolutely cannot
gosh.
do this today. I will not get out of bed. I will not go to therapy and I am not.
Oh, so many days. I mean, here I am, almost 3 years out from this, and forgive me if I made it sound like a walk in the park because it definitely was anything but. I can easily sit here and say, yeah, my family and therapy, and I was good to go and I was great. Not the case. I mean, there were so many days where the most mundane thing might trigger me, right? I would see a little girl out and she would have dark hair, just like my daughter, and I would lose it. I, you know, I didn't go back to work for a month or two. And when I finally did, I only worked like a half a day. And that's the other thing. Like my job, thankfully, was so understanding and so flexible. But, like we would see there were babies there and hearing them cry, it would immediately set me on edge. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I mean, this was not an easy walk in the park by any means. Um, but I was committed to make my daughter proud. And part of that for me was to be happy and to heal because I know that that's what she would have wanted. And so she was a huge motivator for me to keep going and to continue this work in progress and to continue to heal for her. And so that I could continue telling her story and talking about her. And, she lives through us now. So by no means was this a walk in the park. It was a long, long process and it still is. I'm still in therapy. I still cry. I still, all of that, all of that. It doesn't just go away.
I think that's really beautiful though that she was such a motivator for you and like that
Oh,
you found strength and just keeping your eyes on her and knowing like she wouldn't want you to disappear. And I
yeah.
really love that. And I know I'm not sure because I know we chatted about it before how soon after, but you got pregnant again after your daughter. How soon and what emotions came up with that?
So there was, yeah, so she passed in February of 2022, and then I found out I was pregnant again at the end of July or like beginning of August of that same year. And it was, again, it was a huge mixed bag of emotions, right? It was absolute joy, over the moon, so excited. And then it was also this huge, like shadow lurking in the corner of, well, of all these what ifs, what if this, and anxiety and, feelings of, almost like there's a weight on top of you, because you want to make sure that this one goes okay. And so a lot of that kind of, the blissful, naive joy of pregnancy was definitely taken from us with my pregnancy with my daughter. And so that was was no longer there, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can imagine, like you said, just a big shadow and just feeling like probably deep dread.
Yeah, not even it's so strange. It's like not even dread, but it's just like so much like trepidation. I don't know how to explain it. Like I was just so scared to be excited. I was so scared to be happy about it, you know? I almost wanted to be like nonchalant about it, thinking that if I'm not super happy and excited about this, the universe won't take it away from me, kind of.
Right. And what was the outcome after all of those feelings and all of those emotions with the pregnancy?
So I unfortunately suffered another loss and had a miscarriage at I had a missed miscarriage, meaning the baby no longer had a heartbeat, but my body still thought that I was pregnant. And so I was having some symptoms and I went into the ER because I was still too early to I never had even had an OB appointment with this second pregnancy. I was told to go to the ER and they did an ultrasound and they unfortunately told us that baby did not have a heartbeat and that I had unfortunately miscarried. And that baby we call Little Bird. So we have Everly and Little Bird looking down on us.
Aw.
Yeah.
I just know someone out there is listening to your story right now and just being like, "Yes, this is my story. These things happened to me, and I just really appreciate you being really transparent and sharing all of the things because I know someone out there is going to feel the same." And so after these two really big losses, you did have a beautiful little boy, as we
Yeah.
talked about in the beginning, a
Yeah.
son.
Hmm.
So, with these experiences of loss, with Everly and Little Bird, how was his pregnancy different? Like, what other things were coming up along the way as you got closer and closer and closer? Like, tell
Yeah.
us everything.
Yeah. So it was the same sort of feeling as when I got pregnant with Little Bird. It was still like that very big mixed bag of emotions. So it was almost like my pregnancy was punctuated by these certain milestones, right? So the first milestone that I wanted to get to was into the second trimester, right? I wanted to get over 9 weeks because that's when I miscarried with my last pregnancy. So that was a milestone. And then after that, it was like, okay, so now I got to worry about the anatomy scan because, again, the anatomy scan was a huge turning point in my pregnancy with Everly. Okay, anatomy scan went great. And then after that, it was just about getting through all of the other, the trimesters and all of the other testing and, um, things like that. So every step of the way, there was like something that I was essentially waiting for bad news. I don't know how else to put it. Like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. And at every turn of the corner, when we didn't get any bad news, I was just thinking, well, surely there's going to be something. Like this can't be all fine and dandy. And so then, we get towards the end of my pregnancy and I'm going into labor. And so my final thought is, oh my God, oh my gosh, what if something happens during labor or during delivery or because there's so many variables and so many things that can happen and you have no control over it. And I remember, being in labor and just remembering trying to breathe and just, trying to do some mantras that my therapist and I had come up with and had gone through, and, gave birth. Everything went well. And again, I still was thinking, okay, what is it? What's going to happen, or is going to, what's he going to be diagnosed with, or what's going to go wrong? So it was always this feeling of, well, surely something bad is going to happen, because that's been my MO for both pregnancies, So it was it not exhausting, but it was just so tiring to constantly feel that way. And not that I did not enjoy my pregnancy with my son, because I very much did, but there was always, always, always that underlying fear of what's going to happen next, or when is the shoe going to drop. Always, until until I brought him home. I wasn't going to be able to believe that, and allow myself to feel happy and to feel relief until we walked through that doorway with him. Truly.
I believe it. I love hearing you say happiness and relief after hearing the beginning of your story. I bet the happiness and relief with your son was just like overwhelming.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I have a two-part question. So the first part of my question is, you come home with this beautiful little boy. Do you have guilt? Did anything like that come up around Everly bringing your son home?
Oh, 100%. So, I mean, so much, right? And even still, sometimes to this day, with milestones, or, any of that, um, guilt, so much guilt. I mean, for example, I never changed any of my daughter's diapers, and I only got to feed her one time. And so, having him home and being able to take care of him and do all those things, I just felt so guilty that I wasn't able to do that for her, and that I felt like I didn't care for her the way that I should have, or that I could have. But again, you only do what you can in the moment, and you only do what you can with what the knowledge that you have in that moment, and the nurses and things like that, it was like a very regimented thing, changing her diaper or feeding her. And so there was, of course, so much guilt surrounding that, and being so happy and joyful with him, but then having her postpartum experience be so sad and so, you know, tragic.
Yeah, it'd be so different, just so on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Mhm.
I want to talk more about your postpartum experience because from just observing like my friends and their postpartum experiences and I feel like miscarriage and child loss, like these are just things that don't get brought up. I think people tiptoe around them. I think they
Mhm.
feel awkward, they don't know what to
Mhm.
say, or if they have kids, they don't want to make you feel bad if you don't have kids or if you lost a baby. And
Yeah.
so I know when you brought your son home, there's all this joy and there's all this excitement, obviously. Um, and this is my observation, so I'm interested to see what you feel. But I feel like after child loss, you bring your rainbow baby home. And
Mhm.
I feel like society expects you to only get that joy. You have your baby now, you feel
Mhm.
joy, and that is it. But
Yeah.
I just feel like it's a lot more complex. And I
Mhm.
want to know what your thoughts are because, like you said, like you did feel guilt, but what are the other like complexities around bringing home this beautiful baby after so much loss?
Yeah. I think you put it so well, that it was. I mean, anybody in our lives and who knows us, I'm sure they all felt the same way. My gosh, you must be so ecstatic and so overjoyed. You finally got your beautiful baby, and he's home and he's healthy. And, what more could you ask for? You must just be over the moon. And you're right, there's so many more complexities. And I, for one, had a really, really difficult time postpartum with my son. Um, and that was so, I felt so shameful. I felt so guilty. I felt like an awful mother because I was having a lot of postpartum depression and sadness. I did not feel, of course, the first couple of days, yes, it was amazing, but then your hormones absolutely crash, after giving birth, and it takes a week or so. And so that hit me really hard, and I felt so sad. And because I felt sad when I should be feeling happy because I have this wonderful, amazing little boy, I felt so much shame with it. I felt like something was wrong with me. I felt like I was a bad mom, that I wasn't supposed to be a mom. What mother feels this way, going through what I've gone through and then bringing home this beautiful baby boy and feeling this way? What's wrong with me? I must be a terrible person. I must be a terrible mom. And these are the thoughts racing through my mind that I remember thinking at the time. And one of the most heartbreaking things I remember is thinking, well, maybe Everly and Little Bird was God's way of saying that I shouldn't have been a mother. Maybe this was like him telling me that this was not supposed to happen. And did I make the right choice? Feeling so much just shame over that and feeling just like an awful human. I mean, who thinks that, after going through what we went through and then finally having what we feel like is a completion to our family and feeling the absolute saddest that I have felt besides grieving my daughter. Um, and I just want to say, for any person listening that has gone through the same thing, you're not a bad person. You're not a bad mother. You're not a bad parent. And I wish that I would have believed that when my people were saying that to me, because I feel like that would have helped me a lot sooner. But yeah, it was so much more complex than just, well, you just must feel the absolute joy of your life now. So it was really difficult. It was really difficult to like not only admit those feelings, but also admit them so that I could process them and work through it. Um, Shame and guilt are very, very vulnerable emotions to express openly. And I, again, was motivated by my daughter and by my son to just do better. And so I had to just openly admit to myself that, hey, I'm not okay. I'm not okay.
I think the heavy avalanche of dark thoughts in postpartum is also not talked about
No.
enough. And just like you said, like just feeling overwhelmed and feeling like, maybe I'm not supposed to be a mom. And like those thoughts are so heavy and they just fall on top of each other. And it's really hard to get yourself out from under those thoughts when they start. And it's complex because it's not just depression, it's depression with your hormones ramped up. And you're taking care of a human and you have the weight of the trauma from the loss. And so it's so heavy that I think it is hard to ask for help. And I'm so glad that you had, even though, like you said, you didn't believe them, you had your friends and your family being like, these aren't true, these things aren't true. What do you think? I mean, do you feel like the system could have done more? I know not everybody has that support, but do
Yeah.
you think that you got lost in the system? Like, if you didn't have your friends and your family and your therapist, do you think that you could have gotten even further into a dark place without that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel that I think that this is something that I have seen over and over again in the motherhood community. We talk about how, babies have all these appointments and things like that after, birth, very, righteously so, but the mother has one appointment 6 weeks or 8 weeks after giving birth, and then it's okay, you know, kind of brush your hands off and you're good to go. And absolutely, I feel like the system loses those mothers. Absolutely. I feel that the only reason that I didn't get lost in the system is because I very much was like, no, you're not gonna do that to me. And again, if I can give some unsolicited advice, but if you're worried about the postpartum depression and anxiety, and you very much can advocate for a mood check after giving birth. 2 to 3 weeks, after giving birth. Absolutely. I think that in the very beginning when I was talking about that after my daughter had passed, if I had not had that mood check and had been asking for help, God knows what would have happened, and God knows where I would be now. But that's not a regular thing. You have to ask for it. And so yes, that is the crazy part of it all. I mean, who thinks about that after they've given birth, right? They're busy taking care of a newborn, they're sleep deprived. You can barely function as a human, and then let alone you're dealing with postpartum, emotions. You're not thinking about, oh, I should call my doctor up and get a mood check. No, you're not thinking about that. So I do think that the system needs to have something in place where every mom should be getting mood checks before this 6 weeks or 8 week sort of checkup. Absolutely. There needs to be more checks on moms. There's too many moms out there that suffer in silence, and let's not even get into the fact of the moms that don't always survive their postpartum feelings in their postpartum. I mean, people don't talk about that. They don't talk about that, and they should, because it's a very real thing, and it's a very common thing that happens, and it needs to be talked about more. It's like such a taboo subject.
It is. It really is. And I really appreciate you saying all that.
Yeah.
There should be, this should be automatic to take care of the mom, and there should be more advocating for the mom's health post birth and all of these different things. And
Mhm.
I do think we have a long way to go in
Yeah,
that care. And I think you're right as well that because we don't talk about it, the door doesn't seem open, and
right.
it doesn't seem okay to say, "Hi, even though I have this beautiful bundle of joy that I'm totally in love with, I
Mhm.
feel horrible. I'm very depressed. I don't want to get out of bed. This feels like the worst season of
Yeah.
my life."
I mean, and not only that, but you have to think of what a transformative event that is for the mom as well. I mean, you are now in charge of a human. And not only that, but now you have to also take care of yourself and make sure that you are also, not hemorrhaging, or like there's so much more that goes into it. And yeah, it's just yeah, it can, they just get so lost in the shuffle sometimes. And anything that's good for a postpartum mother is going to be good for the baby. Because if mom has her bucket full, and if mom is doing good physically and mentally, baby is going to be doing good physically and mentally and all of the above, and is going to thrive as well. You know, it's the old saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. And I feel like there's so many, especially newly postpartum mothers, that are just pouring from an empty cup. And it's not even because they don't have a supportive partner, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about not having a support system, because I had an amazing support system. I'm so lucky and I'm so grateful. And I still felt like I was pouring from an empty cup, even still, you know? So there are still so many of those moms out there that feel like that. And if we can just open up and just be, feel more vulnerable, that this is such a common thing. It's not normal, because just because something is common does not mean it's normal, but it's so common that I feel like all mothers can at least relate to it in some way or another.
I just love this conversation because I do think if you really step back and look at the whole perspective, we've been giving birth since the beginning of time, and
Mhm.
we still have not figured out this piece on how
Yeah.
to support mothers appropriately. And so
Yeah.
I just think this conversation is so important. It's like you said, just
Mhm.
because, it's common doesn't mean it's normal. And I think that's so important for anybody, you know, listening to this podcast, holding their baby crying, rocking
Mhm.
them at night, not really knowing where to go. You go back to your doctor, you ask for the wellness check, you advocate for
Yeah.
yourself. No one is going to advocate for you right now unless you have that support system.
Yeah.
And the fact that sometimes we have to do it for ourselves, it's really tough, but I'm really glad you brought that up. I think that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I agree. How have we not figured this out by now? And if you advocate for a mood check and you have an OB or a doctor that gives you a hard time, it is time to find a new doctor. That is not a provider that you want to be seen. If they have a problem with making sure that a postpartum mother is healthy mentally, that's not a provider that I would want to be with. So that is, you know, a huge, like I said, again, that was a huge, game changer for me to have those mood checks. And I requested the same thing after my son. I requested another mood check. And, it was again met with support and, okay, we'll get you, set up with X, Y, and Z. And then I had another mood check at my 6 week postpartum. They just make sure everything's okay. But it is astonishing that in the 21st century, we still have not figured out how to care for postpartum mothers in a, just like as a guideline. Like, how do we not have guidelines out there? We have all these guidelines for newborns and for cancer screenings and for all these preventative things. But then when it comes to postpartum mothers, I mean, what's out there? Unless I'm ignorant to it, but personally going through it, I don't know if there is anything out there.
If there are guidelines, somebody message us and tell us
Yeah,
what they
please.
are because
Please
we're
do. Please.
obviously need to know. But
Yes, because I do not claim to be a doctor or an OB or any of that. I am just speaking solely off of my personal experience and off of my personal postpartum experience. And I feel as though if I had not advocated for a mood check, it wouldn't have crossed their minds at all. I would have been seen at my 6 week check and been, okay, you're good to go. So yeah, I just really think that that is a huge, huge game changer. It can be
I
a
think
huge game changer for mothers, postpartum mothers. Yeah.
I agree. I think we've solved the problem now. So just kidding. Lindsay, thank you so much for coming on and just sharing your story. I know it was really difficult to talk about those things, but I know that myself included, but I know there's a lot of moms out there that, appreciated you, going into those vulnerable areas. Hopefully there's somebody out there listening that can see that there's light that exists beyond the dark, and I really appreciate you sharing with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for giving me a platform to talk about my girl. I always love speaking about her and telling her story. Like I said, she lives through us now, and this is one of the best ways that we can keep her alive is sharing
I
her story.
love that.
Mhm.
I love that so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with us this week. If you'd like to connect with me or have an experience you'd like to share, shoot me an email at letstalkitoutproductions@gmail.com. If you liked our music, you can check out Quilter on Spotify. I Know How You Feel drops every other week. See you next time.